A review from the old DWRG of The Stones of Blood. This is titled Lost in Hyperspace by Andrew Wicks and published on the 14th of the 3rd, 02. Of all the flaws that can afflict a DW story, surely the most depressing is great first episode syndrome. You know, when a story comes on strong, atmospheric, and intriguing only to collapse in an unconvincing mess of flapping plot strands and contrived solutions. Stones of Blood is a particularly bad offender, yet it remains for an entertaining enough story, but the second half of the tale isn't anything like as interesting as the first half promises. Stones of Blood is great as long as it's actually about the stones in question and the Celtic cult surrounding them. The Ogre are an off-the-wall monster to say the least, but they terrified me as a 5-year-old, and at least they're original. Similarly, the scenes of Tivris and the other druids have a certain cod creepiness, as do the ones of the ravens on the stones in the TARDIS. The scene where Miss Fey turns out to be the woman in all the paintings is a nice touch too, but in episode 3 it goes all citrus fruit shaped as we're off into hyperspace for another comedy space opera runaround. Now, I quite like this sort of thing in its place, but the beginning of the story promised so much more than a final episode consisting mainly of Tom hamming it up, next to some floaty special effects blobs. Well, it goes without saying that by far the most effective part of this half of the story is the sequence where Canine drives off the Ogre, who then recharge themselves. It's a scene which adds virtually nothing to the plot, being purely there for effect, but what an effect it is, and it betrays how limp the rest of the story is. Still, the story makes a virtue of its tiny cast, and Beatrix Lehman is engagingly lunatic as Professor Rumford. Actually, her performance almost makes up for the collapse of the story. Susan Engels is obviously the villain from very near the start. Was Cesare of Diplos really a brown owl? Are the scouts and brownies infested with immortal alien supercriminals? Hey, someone get BBC Books on the phone, there's a story idea here. And, well, that's about it cast-wise. Perhaps a change of location for the second half of the story was necessary to hide the fact that there are only about 5 guest characters, most of whom have tiny parts, so to speak, or only appear via voiceover. Still, a bit of a wasted opportunity in many ways.